Aristotle wanted to talk about how things were in common in the world as perceived. He realized that our perceptions can differ from one person from another, can differ from one occasion to another, but he wanted to argue that there was something that stood under our perception that existed always and continued indefinitely. This he called the substance of a thing. This appeals to us. Maybe you're familiar with Theseus's ship. The story goes that Theseus, Prince of Athens, went to Crete and rescued his fellow Athenian youths from the grasp of the Minotaur and returned home and freed Athens forever from the oppression of Crete. Surely some kind of metaphorical tale about the relationship between the two cities economically, socially, culturally. Anyway, the story goes he brings back this ship and he sails back on this ship, and to commemorate the great liberation, his ship is kept in the harbor at Athens. Now, this ship was supposed to have been sailed in great deep antiquity. The ship is supposed to have existed for centuries. Now, I don't know if you've ever been on a boat, but salt is not good for wood. Salt water will rot the wood. Barnacles will grow on and eat the wood. All kinds of terrible things happen to wood when it gets wet. So over the years, virtually every board is replaced. The ropes fray and wear. They tear, they're cut. Accidents happen, intentional damage happens. Over the years, all the ropes are replaced. The sails, the wind blows through, birds crap all over them, and the acids in the waste product affect the integrity of the fabric. The sails have to be replaced. In short, over time, every component of the ship has been exchanged. And yet, people still say it's Theseus's ship. That ship has a substance to it that makes it Theseus's ship, regardless of what actually physically is happening there. This underlying whatever, as Locke is famously supposed to have said, this underlying je ne sais quoi, I do not know what, that underlies this ship is what's referred to as the substance. So, the question has to be raised, what is essential to the substance and what is not? Locke proposes that there are primary qualities of a substance, and then there are secondary qualities of a substance. Now, the primary qualities of a substance are those qualities which are inherent in the subject. If Locke were here, he'd suggest take gold. Gold is shiny. Gold is malleable. Gold is heavy. These things are all inherent in gold. You couldn't take them away from gold and gold still be gold. On the other hand, it's being valuable, it's being made into jewelry, it's being the subject of plays and novels and men's great deep desires to gather up into themselves. These things he would call secondary qualities. These are qualities that exist only because of the human mind. We could say that the first set of qualities are necessary qualities, qualities that something had to have in order to be that thing. We could say the second collection of qualities are contingent qualities. They depend upon some outside source for their existence. We could say that the first set of qualities, the primary qualities, the necessary qualities, are innate qualities, whereas the secondary qualities, the contingent qualities, might be said to be external qualities, dependent again on some external feature. We might say that that first set of necessary, primary, innate qualities are objective in the thing itself, whereas the other set, the secondary qualities, are secondary, contingent, external, subjective. And therefore, Locke says, one collection is a more important collection than the other collection. Primary qualities are what are the important qualities of a thing. I tell you this so you understand what's going on in the mind of George Berkeley, Bishop of Cloyne. Berkeley, well, the important thing about the objective nature of Locke's approach to properties is that it requires there be a thing out there, that there is some physical reality which exists independent of the human mind. That's what primary qualities are, properties that exist independent of the human mind. What then if they don't exist independent of the human mind? Let's go back a minute ago. I said gold. Gold is heavy. Gold is heavy compared to what? And the minute I say compared to what, it becomes a product of the act of comparison. And the act of comparison is something that human beings do. You can't compare. You could say gold has, you say, well, I'll get around that. I'll quantify it. I'll say that's not that gold is heavy, but the gold has an atomic weight. And that atomic weight is 197. That's the atomic weight of gold. According to whose measurement scheme? According to what scale? Composed by a person. Weight then. It's shiny? What does it mean to be shiny except that human beings have certain sensory interactions with them? Malleable? Well, it's malleable for human beings. Ants can't make gold bend. It all turns out. It's such and such a length. It's such and such a height. It's such and such a weight. These are all constructions of the human mind, that they could be given other numbers, other assignments. We could even find that some of them, like I was saying about malleability, turn out to disappear if they're not the subject of human beings. Gold has no primary properties, according to Berkeley. Everything exists only as perceived by human beings. The term Berkeley gives us is esse est percipe. To be is to be perceived. Now, that's where a lot of people stop. I want to be fair to Berkeley, though. Berkeley really wants to say to be is to be perceived or to be a perceiver. This is important to Berkeley, as you'll see. So, there's an obvious question. If to be is to be perceived, what happens to something if nobody perceives it? Well, Berkeley has an answer, and the version I'm going to give you here, the first half of the version is by Ronald Knox. The second half, we don't really know for sure who wrote it, but here's the question raised to Berkeley and the answer. There once was a man who said, God must think it exceedingly odd that he finds that this tree continues to be when there's no one around in the quad. The reply, Dear sir, your astonishment's odd. I'm always about in the quad. And that's why the tree will continue to be, since observed by yours faithfully, God. To be is to be perceived. We cannot perceive God. We can infer God. We can reason our way to God. We can have God through faith. But in general, people don't see God. Hear God, smell God, taste God. But we don't need that. After all, the perceiving part of ourselves we do not see, we do not hear, we do not... It's just going on. We think it's going on in here, but it's going on somewhere, wherever it's going on. Wherever it's going on, we can't perceive it. We have direct apprehension of it, but we can't perceive it. It's not through our senses. We know it's there. We have it. It's us. Why? Because we perceive. We are perceivers. We perceive, so we exist. That out there I perceive, only it isn't out there, you see, because it only exists if I perceive it. So it's only here in my mind. We call this subjective idealism. Subjective, it is dependent upon me. Idealism, because it's all in my mind. Or your mind. Although you may turn out to be in my mind. That's a whole other problem. That's called solipsism. And if you want to know more about that, you should watch my video on Augustine and other minds. To be is to be perceived. It is only in perception that things exist. Things which are not perceived do not exist. But all real things are perceived by God all the time because that's God. He's omniscient. He's omnipotent. He's omnipresent. So everything that does, like the tree in the quad, we all go home at night and it doesn't disappear because God's perceiving it. What a wonderful use for God. So much better than that Anselm stuff, first movers and, those were, strictly speaking, well, they were the worst kind of the God of the philosophers. Philosophers will happily give you a God that turns out to not be in the least bit interesting, usually. At least Berkeley's God is interesting. He keeps everything rolling. I don't know if he's any good at anything else, but he's definitely there to make sure the reality stays in place and continues to exist throughout time. But again, everything about reality, the size of a flea's leg. Berkeley points out the size of a flea's leg compared to the flea itself is huge. Compared to you and me, infinitesimal. But there is no absolute measurement. There are only comparative measurements. Only comparative measurements, only comparative colors, only comparative everything in the way of our sensory experience. If compared, dependent on the mind, dependent on the subject that looks at it and makes the comparison. So for Berkeley, we need God to maintain a continuous universe. What a useful thing. Now that's something to think about. Certainly something to talk about. Keep on talking philosophy.